Skid Row Radio. You're listening to radio station WSKID.
So tomorrow, Julian Assange will appeal against the extradition request under the European arrest warrant for extradition to Sweden to answer questions relating to allegations of sexual assault or rape. It's the lowest band of the definition of rape under Swedish law. The offences wouldn't come under rape in British law, but that doesn't matter because under a European arrest warrant, you don't need what's called double criminality, which would say that the offence is considered the same in both countries. No, it doesn't need to be that way. It only needs to be considered the crime in the country requesting the extradition. Now, the European arrest warrant was brought in after 9/11. It was initially intended to speed up the transfer of potential terrorist suspects, but since then it's come under scrutiny for being used for far more minor offences. There's a few things that I picked out. There's one that was the stealing of a chicken and having an overdraft. So it's certainly been abused in the past. Sweden also has come under some criticism for its apparent lack of autonomy when it comes to matters of working with the US. There's a few examples to pick up on. One is the US has an agreement with Sweden to allow them to intercept all internet data that goes through Sweden from Russia. Big kind of surveillance deal there. They can get all that data. Also, Swedish forces are under NATO-US control in Libya. Not quite related, but another example of their kind of kowtowing to US demands. But more related to this, they have recently in the past violated international treaties in relation to surrendering foreign nationals into US custody to be interrogated and tortured. This was the case of extraordinary rendition, which was Agiza versus Sweden at the European Court of Human Rights. Also, Amnesty International and the UN Committee Against Torture criticised Sweden because it rendered 2 refugees to the CIA who were then tortured under the Egyptian regime of Hosni Mubarak. So Sweden's certainly some shady areas of, just giving US what they want, basically. The European arrest warrant, the legislation is really vague and open to interpretation, so it's kind of worrying. I mean, logic is on Assange's side, but the legislation that's being used is so broad that it's very dangerous and he could be extradited despite the fact that there is legislation in place to allow questioning to take place without the extradition being needed. One main point that supporters of Assange have tried to argue is that he couldn't be transferred from Sweden to the US after having been extradited to Sweden because it would require the UK to give permission to do that, being the country that are currently have him in custody. This doesn't take into account the bilateral agreement that Sweden has with the US that kind of bypasses that procedure, and this is referred to as conditional release. This is something that basically is like a temporary surrender of someone who for extradition, and it doesn't require the holding country, i.e. the UK in this instance, to give that extra permission. Ironically, in Cablegate, there was a cable that showed us evidence of this happening before and being manipulated in a way that the US could use that legislation to its advantage. And I'll just read that little excerpt now. It says, under this conditional release procedure, the suspect is lent to the US for prosecution on the condition that they will be returned for prosecution, in this case in Panama, at the end of their sentence. This procedure is much faster than a formal extradition and has proven so successful that the DEA sometimes designs operations to bring suspects to Panama so that they can be arrested there and then turned over to the US authorities quickly. That was from a US Embassy Panama cable in 2008. Of course, the main reason that this extradition appeal to Sweden has been fought so vehemently is the very real fear that after having been transferred there, there'll then be an extradition request from the US to take him from Sweden to the US. To do this, they're going to have to bring charges that are overtly not political or military because the European arrest warrant guards against political extraditions. So they're going to have to word it very carefully, the charges that they bring against them if they do that. And there has been a grand jury been meeting in secret for the last several months in Virginia with no public scrutiny whatsoever, no judges and no defence counsel, just a bunch of prosecutors sitting around getting together, deciding on exactly how best to apply for extradition to charge him and to try and get him in US custody, basically. So that's the real fear here, and that's why it's been fought against so strongly. So my prediction is I actually think he will lose the appeal. I think he will be extradited to Sweden for this questioning. I hope I'm proven wrong. But logic is on his side, although the legislation is so broad could be easily manipulated. So this is tomorrow that's going on. I'll go into a lot more detail about this when the verdicts come through. But that's my prediction. I think he's going to lose. So yeah, hope I'm wrong. I'll speak to you guys later. Bye bye.